Hey everybody, Tony D. Little Joan, Little Joan's out on the couch now. So it's just me with Screenwriter's Rant, a follow-up to The Harder They Fall, which I got a weird reaction from some of the people who commented. I don't know why you're arguing with me. I guess this whole rant's going to be about addressing some of your comments. So first up, The Harder They Fall. Someone mentioned that they thought this was based on a real story. It turns out you are true. I did a little research, and here's the black cowboy that the harder they fall is based on. Nat Love, whose cowboy name was actually Deadwood Dick, and Deadwood Dick was one of those cowboys who had a bunch of dime store novels written about him. But like a lot of cowboys, famous cowboys of that era, what's true and what's not true is a little hard to discern because, even the famous ones like Billy the Kid or more famous ones, I should say, Bat Masterson, those guys who he claimed to have met, had dime store novels written about him, but what's true and what's not true, nobody really knows. Some of it's exaggerated, obviously, because it's not like anybody cared back then. And then, they would just get reprinted to make more money. But people back east loved to read that stuff because that was the fun stuff of the day. So from reading Nat's bio, though, he led a pretty sedate life unless you believe his stories. Unless you believe the dime store novels, he was a pretty upstanding guy. He just lived a normal life. So that leads me to believe that, of course, The Harder They Fall is based more on just a story sort of based on him as opposed to anything that happened in history, which is fine, whatever. He claimed that the novels were written by a guy named Edward Wheeler, who had a hero called Deadwood Dick, and then later Love claimed the novels were written about him because then he entered a rodeo contest which he won, and they nicknamed him Deadwood Dick. But whether or not Deadwood Dick was around and then they called him that because they knew about the novels and he was like the character in the novels, or vice versa, like nobody knows. And he claimed to have met Buffalo Bill and a bunch of the famous guys, and he was in Dodge City. But mostly he seemed to be a law-abiding guy. So he is kind of an admirable character, which just is more evidence why I don't think the trailer does him any justice, because so many people get murdered in it. He did live mostly post-Civil War, which means he wasn't a slave. His father was a freed slave and didn't enjoy his freedom very long. He died shortly after slavery. But he, the story of Nat Love is actually pretty cool. He went out west with $50 in his pocket and made a name for himself and a family, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty ballsy for that time. He did fight Indians and banditos and bandits. And he did get shot a bunch of times. So I can understand why they would pick a guy like this. But, my argument still remains exactly the same. If you're going to have a heroic character, and it's going to be Nat Love especially, you got to make him heroic. He's got to be a hero. Heroes don't kill unarmed people. Sorry. Heroes don't kill helpless prisoners. And somebody pointed out, well, it would have been cliche if they had killed the Confederates. Well, first off, the Confederacy was done, so they can't be Confederate soldiers. So, you have that problem. So, in terms of the history, but again, I'm sure there's a way to make it work. But the way you don't make it work is by coming onto the train, getting a drop on everybody, freeing Idris Elba, and then killing everybody. Like, there was no reason to kill them. Why not lock them all up? Why not take all their guns and tie them up? Seems to me it would have been cooler. You know, make them take all their clothes and make them run around in their underwear. Would have worked. I mean, and again, they're probably doing freeing Idris Elba at the beginning of the movie. That's a high stakes thing to kill all those people at the beginning of the movie. If you kill 10 people in the first act, you have to kill 20 people in the third act and like 50 people in the last act. It's the only way you can up it. The movie has to go like this. That's not this movie, that's all movies. If the movie doesn't go like this, you're not gonna watch it. Those of you excited to see it, okay. I'm telling you, if you see them murder a bunch of guys at the beginning of the movie and then the second act is them talking or getting into fist fights, it's going to be a drop down. Because then you're going to go, wait a minute, they were just murdering people. Why don't they just shoot these guys? Right? That's a problem too. So if they have a scene in the second act where instead of just shooting the bad guy, they punch him out and then like talk to him, you're going to say to yourself, wait a minute. Why don't they just shoot the bad guy? They shot a bunch of other guys who were barely bad. Allegedly. I don't know. I don't know the whole thing. And for those of you blasting me for, well, you are only analyzing the trailer. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. And for the guy who said I was hooked up by something about colonization, I don't know what the F you're talking about. This is about movie structure. This is about screenwriting. You either structure the movie like this, or you have a crap movie. All right? Trust me. Doesn't matter how much funky music they play. If the gunplay doesn't go like this, there's going to be a drop off, and you're going to go, ah. You may not realize it until halfway through the movie, but then it's going to hit you. And then you're going to go, is there anything else on? It started good, but, you know, you ever watch one of those movies that started really strong and then for some reason the ending, it just died? Now, you definitely have to exaggerate with Nat Love to get a Western out of him, but you don't have to exaggerate that he was a good guy, because he actually was. He wasn't a gangster. He didn't rob trains. He was a guy who followed the law. He was a drover. He, got cattle to market or whatever they do, whatever that's called. I forget. Moving cattle. That's what a drover. Yeah, that's the drover. And that's positive. He was a law-abiding guy. He wasn't Jesse James. I like that. And that makes him a hero. So the movie, if you make him a murderer, then what are you doing? So anyhow, that's that. The other point I had to address is someone arguing in the comments of one of my videos from the past few days, I forget which one, about Lost. Okay, you ever see the TV show Lost? So I have to address this. Lost was a TV show. It started about there was a plane crash on an island, and so it was about the passengers sort of surviving the crash and trying to figure out their circumstances, and then the island is super mysterious. And during the course of the show, they kept revealing things, and the things they would reveal would entice you that, oh man, there's a whole crazy thing going on here, and what's this going to reveal? And then the show would continue, and then they'd reveal something else, and that would be like, wow, mind-blowing. Oh, this is going somewhere crazy. And it just kept doing that season after season after season. And then it got to the end of the series, and I only jumped in, I think I jumped in the last season and a half because my friend was really into it, and he's like, you gotta watch the show, it's so good. But I called it out for what it was. I saw the credits. I watched one episode with what's his face, Rob McElhenney, from It's Always Sunny, because there was an article. Oh, he's in the show and he gets killed. Spoilers. So I was like, oh, I got to go see Rob in that, because I was really into It's Always Sunny, and so saw that, and I was like, the show, it's just endless tease, and it was. And so he insisted I watch it with him every week. So I started watching with him. It became our thing for like a year, and and then it ended. And I told him, I said, this show is not going to end well. This is going to not end well, because we were following the rumors and the leaks, and it was big time leaking towards the end of that show, because that was a hot show, right? And the leak apparently was that the ending was, and this would have been a decent ending, I think, that really the whole show was predicated on the fact that on this island there were two godlike beings, and they were having like a little chess match, and that's why so many crazy things happened on the island. And they lived in this like cave, and then the cave was the center of their power or something. But then at the end it was this, I can't even remember the ending because it was so weird and esoteric. It was like everybody was dead kind of ending. Like it ends in this weird church, and it's all very misty, and it's kind of the end. So I it was just dumb. It was just a dumb way to end it. There was a million ways to end it, and that to me was the dumbest way. And I had called it for what it was. It was a cliffhanger show. Now this is a problem in comics that they do all the time. The old school way of formatting was everything begins and ends on a cliffhanger, right? So the end of a comic would always be, oh, look out, Green Arrow, there are missiles coming this way. And you'd be like, oh man, how's he going to get out of this? I better buy the next issue. And then you buy the next issue of Green Arrow, and it would start with Green Arrow. I was just going to the Justice League, and when I turned, I saw missiles coming my way. How did I get here? And then it might go back in time, like 10 minutes, to explain why the missiles launched at him, and he would somehow get out of it, and then the story would start. Then it would go on with a story, whatever it was, and then go right back into another cliffhanger, so you would buy the next issue. And that worked in comics for many years. Jack Kirby was pretty much a master of that. If you read the old Fantastic Fours, he was really good at that. But what you have to understand about the old school comics, like when Kirby was writing, they were a lot longer than the current comics. Like the current comics are 22 pages. By the time you set up, resolve the cliffhanger, do a story, you're out of room. You don't even have room for the story because you got to do the final cliffhanger. And that's part of the problem. When Kirby was doing comics, I think they were at least, I want to say 32 pages, something like that. They were girthy, a lot girthier than they are now. So you had that extra 10 pages made a big difference. Big difference. As a guy who's scripted a ton of comics, believe me, an extra 10 pages, oh, yeah. Because that 10 pages, first off, the 22 pages you have now, if you just had that for the story and you had an extra 10, you could do 5 and 5 for the cliffhangers. And that gives you 22 pages to do a story, which is still a little tight, but you could do it. And that's a good sized comic. And if you do stuff like, set recaps and character bios on the first page, it gives you even more room because you don't have to explain a lot of things. So Lost was the TV equivalent of that. It was always cliffhangering. Always. And it was always revealing stuff that was supposed to be deep and mysterious and dark. The problem is, it seems to me the writers had no payoff in mind. Right? So if I start a series, and I'll give you an example, Harlan Ellison, the famous Harlan Ellison, if you've never read him, he once scripted this show. And the premise of the show was they were kind of like primitive people living in this world, and they were trying to find this place. And so the idea was the first or second season was all about them trying to find this place. I forget the exact details. But when they find the place, what they find is a control room. And they realize At that moment, their entire world is on a spaceship and has been, jettisoning to the stars for eons, and their world is some kind of indoor world. And they find the spaceship. So it completely changes the nature of the show, like 1 or 2 seasons in, and that's the big reveal, right? The big reveal is you're not on a planet, you're on a spaceship. That's a big reveal. The problem with Lost is they would tease that maybe at some future point there's going to be a big reveal because isn't this weird? And then they wouldn't deliver on that. They would just give you a bunch of other teasers and you'd be like, well, wait a minute, what happened to all those other things? I don't worry about that. This is the new thing. And they get you to the next season or the next show, and they just did that for a bunch of seasons, and then they just ended the show. And that's why a lot of people who watched the show for a long time were extremely disappointed. It also became a victim of its own success, like a lot of I think this happens more with American TV than anything else. The show became so insanely popular, and there were so many actors on it, some of them started asking for more money, and then they became the focus, and some left, and some came back, and some got killed, and, it was a whole thing, like, lost this, lost that. It was constantly being promoted. And so, as a creative piece, it was, I think, a creative sleight of hand, right? And anybody can do that if you're just skilled enough, right? So if I set to do out a TV show, let's say it's a Western about Nat Love, and at the end you watch this cool Western and he shoots a bunch of people, and at the end of the episode he finds a robot, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, wow, what? And then it's like, tune in next week, I'm going to tell you what happens. And then next week you tune in, and I don't really explain the robot because some other stuff happens. And then we continue on with a story, and he goes to drink in he has a big fight, and a bunch of other cool stuff happens. But then he goes to drink in this ocean stream and drinks the water, and then feels something weird at the bottom of the little pond, and he pulls on it, and it turns off the water, and the water in the lake drains away, like it's a automatic, like it's artificial. And then you'd be like, what is that? And then next week another thing happens, and I don't explain what happened at the lake. Instead, it's revealed that his wife is really his sister. I could just keep doing that, revealing and again and again and again. And as long as I do it in such a way that I keep distracting you from the previous cliffhanger or the previous reveal, then you get caught up in the current reveal. And you'll keep tuning in as long as I keep entertaining you. And that's a way to do it. But at the end of that show, you're not going to say, wow, I got to go back and watch all that. You'll go, well, that was entertaining, but ultimately it was a bunch of nonsense. And that, to me, what Lost was. It was a bunch of nonsense. It was a bunch of cool nonsense. Some of it was cool. There was that first episode where they're crash landed and somebody gets a little too close to the one remaining engine on the plane. They get sucked into it, and they go, ah! And then there was the fat guy and a bunch of other characters. I don't remember. But ultimately, the show was a victim of it. It was so successful. The characters and the writers, they were just more concerned about getting you to watch than actually coming to a conclusion. Same thing. I would put that in the same category as Game of Thrones, Sopranos, X-Files. They all became victims of their own success, and they didn't know how to up the ante any further so you could watch it. So then they resorted to gimmicks and, zig when they should have zagged. And ultimately, there's only so much you can do, right? Or you can have a show like Breaking Bad, which has an amazing ending, which has an amazing run. It's practically a perfect TV show overall. And that's something you'll watch forever, right? Same thing with, say, Back to the Future. It's a great little trilogy. It's perfect the way it is. Doesn't need to be rebooted. We don't need another sequel. We don't need a movie jammed in between 2 and 3. It is what it is. It's good. So, if you want to be entertained, but in the end just sort of forget the show, yeah, you could tune into a show like Lost. Lost won't have any rerun potential, because if you try to rerun Lost, right, and somebody says, I never saw the show Lost, is it any good? Anybody who's seen it will probably go, oh yeah, but the ending is not great. It's the same thing with Game of Thrones. You're going to watch it. Now, Game of Thrones is so awesome, the first three and a half seasons, it's probably worth watching, because those first 3.5 seasons are incredible. But, ultimately, the downside of it, you wouldn't watch. For Lost, there'd almost be no reason to watch it, because everything was predicated on how it was all going to end. And because it just teased you endlessly, there's no reason to watch it again. Breaking Bad is an amazing transformation to watch from beginning to end. And that's what stories are about. They're about people, and they're about their transformation. You watch Walter White being transformed, and you're transfixed by that transformation because it's so stark. And when you watch it from beginning to end, my God. When you watch Lost from beginning to end, I mean, it's an appropriately named show, Lost. Like, you'll be lost. When are you going to give me info here? It's a constant, in my view, a constant tease until the end. And you might say, no, it wasn't. It was the greatest show ever, as somebody keeps defending in the comments. But, okay, you can like it. You can like bad stuff if you want. That's just my view. But if you want to watch something that's good, you have to understand how it's crafted. And there was a time in which critics, people who discussed movies and TV shows, were good at pointing that out. Now they're mostly just shills for movie companies. I'm not a shill for a movie company. I don't work for a movie company. And if I, when I do, I wouldn't critique. I've had people ask me, critique my movie. If I know them, I can't really do that. Or if I do, I have to tell you, well, I'm a friend of this person. I'm going to go easy on them, obviously, right? You're not really getting that from most critics. They are glad-handed, sent on press junkets and whatnot. I'm not set on press junkets. If I was, I'd feel obligated to tell you, and then I'd probably never be invited again. And I've had friends who were, one guy I know who's super honest. He talks about how he goes on these junkets, and he said they'll give you anything. They'll give you access to the stars, but they expect good press. And most people will give good press because it gets them back on the junket, where you get free stuff and free food and free trips. You get to hang out with the celebrities, and all you have to do is say you like their movie. And that's what YouTube, I think, is tuning into. In fact, I think the algorithm is getting so sophisticated, I think at some point they will be able to, basically rank certain videos that talk about film. So, the bad reviews go whoop, they disappear, and the good reviews come to the top. And that'll be fine for certain YouTube influencers, I guess, because they'll continue to get the money and the fame and whatnot, and they'll be given perks and invited in. And there are some people who just pick the wrong thing. They're just caught up in the moment, and they're just biased for whatever reason. There's certain things I'm biased towards. I like zombie movies and time travel and stuff like that. But you got to trust me on The Harder They Fall. I'm a huge fan of Idris Elba and Westerns. So I really wanted to like that movie. But I'm telling you, it's fatally flawed. But you don't have to listen to me. Watch the movie yourself and then report back to me. Tell me what you think.